Hi, everyone, and welcome to my podcast, That's Life, I Swear. I'm your host, Rick Barron. You know, the 2026 World Cup was introduced to the hydration break. The controversial 180-second pauses in action may have turned the 26th World Cup into the booziest tournament in history. Somewhere in a FIFA conference room, an executive in a crisp suit had decided that millionaire athletes sprinting in summer heat needed a mandatory water break. Okay, that's fair. But what nobody in the room anticipated was that thousands of fans in the stands heard hydration break and interpreted it as a personal athletic challenge of their own. One not measured in millimeters of water, but in pints of beer, consumed before a stadium clock hit zero. Welcome to That's Life, I Swear. This podcast is about life's happenings in this world that conjure up such words as intriguing, frightening, life-changing, inspiring, and more. I'm Rick Barron, your host. That said, here's the rest of this story. FIFA's official line was that these 3-minute pauses, dropped into the middle of each half, existed purely to protect players from dangerous heat. That's a good thought. That was a notable sentiment, and also a slightly funny one, given that several of the tournament's venues had roofs, air conditioning, and the climate control of a luxury mall. Players inside those buildings were about as endangered by heat as a penguin in a meat locker. But intent mattered less than outcome, and the outcome was glorious chaos. And what do I mean by that? Soccer purists called the breaks an insult to the sport's rhythm, a sponsor-driven intermission dressed up as medical concern. Okay, give them a little slack here. But hold on. An entirely different demographic quietly declared the hydration break the single greatest rule change in the sport's history. People holding beer tickets. Now, what emerged from this loophole was a strange, unofficial sport within a sport. Call it competitive beer logistics. The moment a referee's whistle called for the break, sections of crowds transformed from passive spectators into something resembling a relay team that had skipped all its practices, but still really wanted the gold medal. Now, the format was simple and brutal, 180 seconds. That was the entire window to abandon your seat, navigate a concrete maze of strangers, locate a vendor, complete a transaction, and then sprint back before the ball was back in play. Fans started treating it like a personal decathlon, complete with self-imposed rules, trash talk, that's good, and post-event analysis that would have made an Olympic broadcast blush. Now, friendly groups took this serious and began assigning roles before kickoff. I'm not kidding, like it was a heist movie. So various venues kind of went through the same thing, but I'll give you a couple here. Now, one story was shared where one person was on, quote-unquote, on beer duty for the entire half, responsible for memorizing the fastest concourse route and preloading cash so there was no fumbling for a card reader while precious seconds evaporated. Others timed their own runs on phone stopwatches, comparing personal bests between matches the way a runner might brag about having shaved 4 seconds off a 5K run. There was apparently a real difference, though, between a clean hydration break, where you return to your seat with time to spare, and a photo finish, where you were still standing in the aisle when the ball touched off, and your view of the opening pass was blocked by someone's expensive interpretation of a national team jersey. Now, the 2-beer limit per person only sharpened the competitive instincts. This is getting good. With supply cap, fans optimized like overworked logistic managers, sending the fastest walker in the group on the run while everyone else held seats, or staggering bathroom trips and beer runs across separate breaks to avoid bottlenecks. Talk about project management. Now, somewhere out there, a supply chain consultant could have watched grown adults solve the exact problems they get paid 6 figures to fix, except the stakes were a lukewarm, large beer instead of quarterly results. As with any emerging sport, technique developed quickly among stadium regulars. At the bottom sat what was called the panickers, fans who waited until the whistle actually blew before deciding what they wanted, then spent 40 seconds standing at the counter, squinting at a menu they had 2 hours to study. One tier up were the Sherpas, I'm not making this stuff up, who carried everyone's order memorized and executed with grim efficiency, accepting cash from 4 different friends, mid-jog, without ever breaking stride. Now there's an athlete. Now, at the top of the pyramid were the self-appointed closers, the rare fan who returned to their row with drinks in hand and seconds to spare, settled in, and didn't even look winded, as if they hadn't just powered walked the length of 2 football fields balancing 3 cups of beer. Now naturally, stories got passed around sections like campfire tales. The guy who supposedly made it there and back in 90 seconds flat. The group that got separated and had to communicate by text mid-run. The unfortunate soul who tripped on a stair, lost an entire beer, and then had to decide in real time whether hydration mattered. Spoiler alert, hydration won. Adding another layer to the self-imposed games, many stadiums had something most fans abroad had never experienced. Vendors wandering the aisles with coolers strapped to their bodies like over-caffeinated ice cream men. For supporters used to European stadium rules, where you couldn't so much as glance at a beer within view of the pitch, this was the equivalent of discovering a cheat code in a video game they played for 20 years. This created its own subcategory of bragging rights. Again, I am not making this stuff up. Fans who managed to flag down a roaming vendor without ever standing up started treating it as the platinum achievement of hydration break culture, the beer equivalent of catching a foul ball without spilling your nachos. Why run a sprint when you could simply raise a hand and let victory come to you? Some fans even started ranking sections of the stadium by vendor frequency, the way real estate agents rank neighborhoods by school districts, quietly relocating seats between matches based purely on foot traffic patterns of a man with a cooler. My God, what one won't do for a beer. Now, spare a thought for concession workers who efficiently become referees in a sport nobody told them they were playing. Vendors described shifts that flipped from dead silence to controlled mayhem in the space of a single whistle, watching a sleepy concourse turn into a stampede the instant the clock started. Now, some started treating the rush itself with sporting respect, mentally clocking which customers moved with purpose and then which ones wandered up, still deciding what they wanted, as if the break was starting later for one group than the other. A few workers reportedly began their own version of the game, competing to see how fast they could process an order, swapping tips on faster card tap setups, and pre-pouring cups during the lull right before a break started, the way a sprinter might stretch before a gun went off. Now, nobody was timing them officially, but everybody seemed to know who was the fastest pourer on shift was, and that person carried themselves accordingly. Now, all of this unfolded against the backdrop of what may have been the thirstiest World Cup on record. After the last edition stadiums went dry almost overnight, this tournament swung hard in the opposite direction, hosted largely in venues built for a different sport that had never had a complicated relationship with beer sales. Entire host cities reported being swarmed by traveling supporters with legendary stamina. Pubs ran through inventory like it was the last call on New Year's Eve, and at least one city extended bar hours deep into the morning just to keep up with demand. Visiting fans, by various accounts, treated the local hospitality industry less like a sightseeing stop and more like all-you-can-drink buffet with a strict time limit. And local bartenders began referring to certain traveling supporter groups the way meteorologists discuss incoming weather systems, with a mix of dread and professional respect. Now, to be fair, not every fan weaponized the break for beverage purposes. A small, noble minority actually used those 3 minutes the way FIFA intended, for water, for the restroom, for catching their breath after standing through a tense first half. Now, these fans reported a kind of quiet relief, a small luxury previously unavailable to anyone terrified of missing a goal during a bathroom trip. It was a low bar for gratitude, but in a 90-minute match where one moment could decide everything, even a guilt-free trip to the restroom counted as a win, even if by halftime they were the only ones in their row who hadn't started comparing personal best sprint times. So what can we learn from this story? What's the takeaway? Well, the real lesson here isn't about soccer rules, marketing gimmicks, or even alcohol. It's about how human nature instinctively turns any structured pause into a personal challenge. Give a crowd a clock and a task, and a meaningful chunk of them will quietly start competing against themselves, their friends, or an invisible scoreboard, even when nothing is actually on the line. FIFA built a mechanism for player safety, but fans repurposed it into a beer fuel scavenger hunt with bragging rights as the only prize. I mean, it's a small, funny reminder that humans will gamify almost anything, even hydration. Well, there you go, my friends. That's life, I swear. For further information regarding the material covered in this episode, I invite you to visit my website, which can be found on Apple Podcasts for show notes and the episode transcript. As always, I thank you for the privilege of you listening and your interest. Be sure to subscribe here or wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. And we'll see you soon.